Okay, so starting off with the supplies that I use. So firstly you need cloth, obviously, and you can use any cloth you want, but I have ordered some Ida cloth off Amazon just because that's what I have access to right now because of quarantine. And you can get this in many colors, obviously, but I just have black and this beige color. And essentially what Ida cloth is this cloth that already has little holes in it for your needle to go through. Next, you obviously need hoops to hold your fabric, and I just use regular old bamboo hoops because they're slightly more sustainable and I think they look a little bit cuter. Next, you obviously need thread, and I bought a kit off Amazon that came with a box, thread, needles, and scissors, but I also ended up buying a pack of just regular thread, and I ended up making a little kit of my own of my favorite colors. And next thing you'll need is these little spoolies, so if you end up buying more thread than what comes with your kit, you'll want to use these to be able to store your thread a little bit easier. Next, you need scissors specifically for thread cutting. These are the ones that came with my kit. I personally use a needle threader because I cannot thread a needle, and these are just all the little needles that came with my kit. This last thing is optional, but I just like to have air erasable pens to be able to draw freely on my cloth without it staining it. So this is the first hoop that I ever did, and as you can still see the pencil marks even if I went over it with eraser, so that is why I like the air erasable pens. And this is the latest one that I did. So first, to get started, obviously you want to get your cloth inside of your hoop, and you want to take the inner hoop and put it under your cloth, and then take the outer hoop and put it right on top of it. Next, you want to start tightening the little screw up top so you can keep your cloth nice and secure inside the hoop. So now you're going to want to cut your fabric, and you want to make sure you don't have too much excess on the outside, but you still want to have enough to be able to pull it, because sometimes when you're embroidering it'll start to loosen up, and you want to make sure that your fabric is always nice and taut. So at the end of your cutting and pulling, it should look like this. So now it is time to decide exactly what you want to embroider, and I like to use Pinterest for inspiration, and I actually have a board dedicated all to embroidery, so if you guys want to check that out, I will link that down below. Yeah, I just like to see what other people are up to and kind of get my ideas from that. And if you have a specific idea in mind, you can even look that up with embroidery after it to see if other people have done it and the kind of techniques that they used to do so. So because I was planning on doing a bee embroidery, I looked up other bee embroideries. And finally, if you are in need of any reference pictures, you want to go ahead and Google those. And because I am doing a bee for this one, obviously I looked up a picture of a little bumblebee. I personally do not use any patterns or anything pre-made. I draw them all myself, but I understand that not everyone feels confident enough to draw onto their cloth, so I recommend that you guys print out your pictures that you want to draw and place them on a window, and then place your fabric on top of it, and you'll be able to see the shape underneath and trace it from there. Once I feel confident about something that I've drawn with my air erasable pen, I will go over it with a real pen just to make it permanent, because the air erasable pens do tend to fade pretty quickly and embroidery takes a long time, so the air erasable pen will probably be gone by the time that I get to that part of the embroidery. So now I am just planning the foliage that I want to put around the bee, and this part I tend to freestyle a little bit more, and I actually ended up changing what I wanted to do at the very end and went against what I drew. So yeah, I just look at inspiration pictures of other embroidered flowers and plants and stuff and go from there. So now that I have fully planned out my embroidery on my cloth, it is time to choose my color scheme, and I wanted to base it around that mustardy yellow that I was going to use in the bee, and I came up with this color palette. If you are struggling to come up with a color palette, you can always use color palette websites and pre-made color palettes off of Pinterest. So this is a non-expert's explanation on how to thread a needle and prep your thread for embroidering, but I am just pulling it through the needle threader, and then I'm just gonna push the needle threader through the eye of the needle, and you want to make sure to push it all the way in and through because that's what's actually gonna push the thread through. I don't know if this is the proper way to do it, but that's how I do it. And then at the very end of your thread, you just want to make sure to tie a knot because that way your thread will not go fully through the cloth. So now it is time to actually embroider, and I'm taking that dark brown color to do the body of the bee, and I don't really know how to explain exactly what I'm doing because I don't use the real/technical stitches that exist in the embroidery world, but I am just pushing my needle up from the back and then putting it right back down into the previous hole. So this is, I guess, kind of similar to a back stitch, but you can see what I'm doing here. So the most important thing when it comes to embroidering is direction. So for this middle part of the body, I chose to do a kind of circular direction with my stitching just because I wanted to show the roundness of that part of the bee. So now I am starting that top yellow stripe of my bee, and I decided to use that same stitch to outline the top part of the stripe just to kind of get a sense of the shape, and then I started to actually fill in the yellow with just a stitching that went from the bottom of the stripe to the top. So I use that same stitch with the other yellow stripe, and then for that little white tip of the bee's butt, I am doing a kind of longer stitch than I used for the body, but not as long as I did for the yellow stripes. So now it is time to do the wings, and for these I kind of wanted to accentuate that long, elegant shape that the wings have, so I'm just starting from one tip of the wing all the way to the other tip and kind of creating that long stitch. So now I'm moving on to the little legs of the bee, and I'm just starting from one end to the other end of a leg. It's pretty self-explanatory. So now that the legs are completed, I am moving back to the wings, and I'm going to be doing the little outline that shows the shapes within the wings. now that I have completed the bee, I'm starting on the leaves and flowers, and for the stem of these leaves, I'm literally just kind of doing an outline of them. For the actual leaves, essentially what I'm doing is pulling my needle through the very tip of the leaf and then pulling it down to where it connects to the stem. And then to fill in the leaf, I am just repeating that, but doing it a little bit lower so I can create that pointed shape. So now that I finished both of those leaves, I am moving on to my big flowers, and here I am going to teach you how to do a French knot. And essentially what you're doing is you're wrapping your thread around your needle 3 times, and then you're pulling it through right next to where you pulled it up. You don't want to do it in the exact hole that you pulled up your needle, but right next to it. Here I'm quickly doing the stem and branches of this flower with a lighter green color, and I'm doing them in the same way that I did the other stem. Now I'm adding the actual flower part to these flowers, and I love doing this style of flower because it kind of looks like a little baby's breath, but I'm essentially just doing a bunch of little French knots with that white color that I used in the bee. Now to begin the petals of the flower, I'm using the same yellow color that I used in the bee. And to do these petals, it's essentially the same as I did with the dark green leaves, except you want to follow the petal shape instead of the leaf shape. So this is the part where I completely ignored what I drew, but I'm taking a really saturated rust color and I'm kind of just doing an X and then doing another X on top of it to create a different kind of flower. And then once I finish that flower shape, I am just doubling up the thread and going back over each part that I did to make the flower a little bit thicker. Now I am quickly doing a little bud for the center of those bigger rust flowers, and I'm just doing one little French knot for that. And that is the finished embroidery hoop, guys. I hope this was helpful and I hope you guys enjoyed. I did kind of try to rub off the pen markings that I messed up on and they kind of smeared a little bit, but it's okay. I just do these for fun. They don't have to be perfect. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed and I will see you guys in the next one.